He survived 5 floggings, 3 beatings with iron rods, a stoning, 3 shipwrecks. He wrote more than half of the New Testament. He was unstoppable, but there was one thing, one unnamed thing, that broke him enough to beg God 3 times to make it stop. And God said no. What was it? And why did Paul refuse to tell us? The story starts in one of Paul's most personal letters, 2 Corinthians chapter 12. This is not a carefully organized theology lesson. This is a man defending himself. His enemies in the city of Corinth were calling him weak, saying he was unimpressive, that he wasn't a real apostle. So Paul does something unexpected. Instead of listing his victories, he lists his suffering. 5 times he received 39 lashes. 3 times he was beaten with rods. Once he was stoned and left for dead. 3 times he was shipwrecked. He spent a night in the open sea. He faced danger in cities, in deserts, on rivers, from strangers and from his own people. Then, right after all of that, he mentions something different, something he never fully explains. To keep me from becoming proud, he writes, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. He begged God 3 times to take it away. And God answered, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And that is all we get. No name, no description, no explanation. For a man who documented nearly every hardship in extraordinary detail, this silence is deafening. He tells us about his beatings, his shipwrecks, his sleepless nights. But this one thing, this single unnamed wound, he refuses to name. 2,000 years of scholarship and still no answer. What was Paul hiding? And why does it still matter? To understand why this silence matters, you need to understand Paul's world. He wrote this letter around 55 to 57 of the Common Era during his 3rd missionary journey. Corinth was one of the wealthiest and most competitive cities in the Roman Empire. In that world, how you looked mattered. Physical strength was a sign of divine favor. A leader who appeared weak or physically limited would lose credibility immediately. Paul's opponents in Corinth, he calls them the super apostles, were using exactly that against him. They said he was unimpressive in person, that his body was weak, that he didn't look like someone God had chosen. Naming his affliction would have handed them the weapon they needed. But most readers miss something important. The Greek word Paul uses, skolops, doesn't mean a small rosebush thorn. In classical Greek literature, a skolops was a sharpened stake, the kind used in military barriers driven into the earth. This is not a minor irritation. Whatever Paul carried, it was severe and inescapable. There are more clues. In his letter to the Galatians, chapter 4, Paul mentions that his first visit to them was caused by a bodily condition. He says the Galatians would have torn out their own eyes and given them to him. And later, in chapter 6, he notes he is writing with large letters in his own handwriting, a detail that has caught the attention of medical researchers for decades. These are small pieces, but they point somewhere, and scholars have been following that trail ever since. So what was the thorn? 4 credible theories have survived the test of centuries. The most widely held view is a physical illness. Early church writers suggested headaches or ear pain, but many modern scholars focus on eye disease. The references to eyes in Galatians, the large letters, Paul's reliance on scribes, all of this points towards severe, chronic eye inflammation. In the ancient world, such a condition would have been visible, disfiguring, and easy for opponents to weaponize. Others point to malaria. Paul traveled through the low, swampy coastal regions of what is now southern Turkey, an area known in his time for disease. Recurring malaria creates exactly the pattern Paul describes, suffering that comes and goes, sometimes disabling him, sometimes allowing him to press forward. A third group of researchers has proposed epilepsy. In Paul's time, this condition was literally called the sacred disease, associated with divine or demonic activity. That framework lines up with Paul calling the thorn a messenger of Satan. Epileptic events can also produce intense visionary experiences, followed by severe exhaustion, which maps directly onto Paul describing a heavenly vision immediately before the thorn appears. Then there is a fourth interpretation, one rooted in the Old Testament itself. Scholar Terence Mullins noted that every time the image of a thorn in the flesh appears before Paul, it refers to a person. In Numbers chapter 33 and in Joshua chapter 23, thorns in the flesh are enemies who resist and oppress. Under this reading, Paul's thorn was not a physical ailment. It was a person, a persistent opponent who disrupted his ministry wherever he went. Each of these theories is credible, none is conclusive. But here is what all four share. The thorn was something Paul could not control, something that remained despite his faith, despite his prayers, despite everything he had sacrificed. He asked God 3 times for it to end. God said no. That is one of the most honest moments in the entire New Testament. What is remarkable is not the mystery of what the thorn was. What is remarkable is what Paul chooses to do with it. Every social rule in his culture said, hide your weakness. Physical strength was divine favor. Admitting your body was broken meant losing the argument. And yet Paul does not hide it. He announces it. He even boasts about it. Psychologists call this a meaning reframe, rebuilding your understanding of a painful experience until it no longer defines you. Paul is not pretending the suffering is easy. He begged 3 times for it to end. That is the behavior of someone in real distress, not effortless acceptance. But after the 3rd refusal, something changes. He writes, I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Modern research documents exactly this pattern. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth, a documented process where people who survive serious suffering sometimes report a deeper sense of meaning than those who never suffered at all. Not because the pain was good, but because they found a way to carry it without being destroyed by it. There is also something quietly brilliant in Paul's silence. By refusing to name the thorn, he wrote a passage that belongs to everyone who suffers. Every person who has prayed and not received the answer they needed. Every believer carrying something that will not leave. The unnamed thorn becomes a mirror. Whatever you carry, chronic illness, grief, a wound that refuses to close, Paul's silence makes room for you inside his story. 2,000 years later, we still don't know what Paul's thorn was. Doctors have guessed, scholars have argued, theologians have debated, the text remains quiet. Maybe that silence is the answer. Maybe the most important thing Paul ever wrote was not the words he chose, but the one word he deliberately left out. Because in leaving a blank, he gave every suffering person a place to stand inside his story. Whatever your thorn is, the letter has already been written, and the ending is always the same. My grace is sufficient for you. If ancient questions like this keep you searching, if you believe that history, archaeology, and human psychology can make the scriptures come alive, then this channel was made for you. Subscribe to Éden Unsolved and join us every week as we go deeper into the stories that shaped the world. And if this episode made you think, leave a like. It tells us the search is worth continuing.